Welcome to Bears Over Beers. I'm Jeff Burkus, a writer for Windy City Gridiron, and I'm joined, as always, by EJ Snyder. EJ, I went to Soldier Field. I got Justin Fields to start. He got a win. I mean, I feel like I should get season tickets. Everything is good in Chicago.
Yeah, I think that's a necessity at this point because not only did you get him a start, but you got Nagy to get off his Dalton pillar. He now says Fields is a starting quarterback for the rest of the year. I don't think we can mess with the streak here. I mean, it's only one, but I don't think we can mess with the streak. It's important stuff.
Well, we have a streak going on Bears Over Beers of pretty amazing guests, and we are continuing that streak tonight. We got Ted Nguyen from The Athletic, who's also covers the Raiders. We got that, but he does some amazing film work. You can find Ted on Twitter at FB_film analysis, which I feel like was a very early Twitter handle to get in on that. But Ted, thank you so much for coming on Bears Over Beers.
No problem. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, I don't think as much people want that handle as you think. People always confuse me as a guy that works at Facebook. They think I work in tech for some reason.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, I don't like the underscore. That's maybe one thing I'm not a big fan of is underscore. I wanted to make sure I didn't do that when I set up my handle. But otherwise, I feel like you came in early to get something like that.
Sort of. My first handle was Raiders analysis when I just covered the Raiders. I was surprised I was able to get that one actually, but yeah.
Well, we'll get into Raiders, but we need to have a couple of drinks as is customary around here. And EJ, I'm going to let you go first because I got something special.
Oh, of course. You always have something special. I have something lucky that actually would have worked much more appropriately for the game that I sat about 25 feet under Ted to watch, which was week one Ravens Raiders. And this is the Black Raven Flocktoberfest lager.
Wow.
Yep. You know, it's seasonal. I have had stuff from Black Raven before, but I have not had this. This one's new to me. Usually the stuff I get from them is either their IPAs or their stouts. It's a limited release. Czech hops, made right up in Woodinville, Washington. So I'm excited. New beer for me, and that's always a good day. What do you have?
Can't believe you didn't save that for later this year. You'll have to have another one. Do you see this lovely bottle here?
Oh, I do.
This is Weller Antique 107. I'm showing it to the YouTube crowd that will be posting this video later. This is a bottle that I have been trying to find for a long time, and a listener, Chad Vonk, was kind enough to gift me this bottle. And so an amazing gift from a listener, and as a thank you for putting out Bears Over Beers and Hallis to Mac, my history series that I did last summer. So thank you, Chad. And we are going to open this up and get this going. So
that's like liquid Patreon. That's awesome.
I mean, getting paid in hard to find whiskey is kind of an amazing perk. I did not know we could do that.
So, you know, seems as though we can until somebody tells us we can't. So we'll ask for forgiveness rather than permission.
Well, cheers to that.
You guys have some amazing listeners. That's a pretty awesome little gift there.
I should say so. He needs to get a T-shirt back for sure.
Fair enough.
On the mail to Chad. So let's get into this. Ted, because I find the Raiders to be pretty interesting. They're interesting first and foremost because they have one of the most soundbite head coaches in John Gruden. He's in year 4 of the 10-year, $100 million contract on the remix as he comes back as the Raiders head coach. We know he's good for the quotes. We know he's good for some offense, but what is going on overall with this team? And how would you evaluate his second stint here as Raiders head coach?
I think from a coaching perspective, especially from the offensive side of the football, he's brought exactly what Mark Davis wanted him to bring. He was able to really elevate Derek Carr's game, really worked on some of the things that he struggled on, like playing under pressure and making second reaction type of plays. And those are the things that Carr struggled with. Even in 2016, when he has his MVP candidate type of year, he just wasn't good in those aspects. And Gruden came in, he saw those as weaknesses, and he made it a point to really get Carr to be more aggressive. And it's he saw his numbers slowly climbing year to year, and this year it's really kind of exploded. And I think when Mark Davis hired him and gave him that contract, he wanted him to have a special type of relationship with Derek Carr where he could be have some continuity in an offense and really take some ownership of it. And I think we're starting to see that with Carr. Unfortunately, I think John Gruden, the general manager, kind of gets in his way sometimes. And the team, although he has hit on some prospects like Max Crosby, but just like on just some of the first round draft pick reaches, like with Cleveland Farrell, those type of picks have hurt this team. So I just think that as far as the general manager is kind of a mixed bag. I would say it is more bad than good. But as an offensive play caller, he's been everything as advertised.
That's funny because we have a coach in Chicago that gets in his own way sometimes. He's a good play designer, and he's a good we'd call him a CEO head coach. Players play for him. He can keep people engaged, but he's a terrible play caller. So he's got a different strength and different weakness. But it's really interesting that you brought up Carr under pressure because just last week they played the Chargers. Joey Bosa said, and we quote about Derek Carr, great dude, great player. Carr's been having a great year, but we know once you get pressure on him, he kind of shuts down and he's not as effective with crowded pockets. Probably true of most quarterbacks, right? You get in their face and they're less effective. But is pressure the only way to get into Carr's face and slow him down? Or are there other ways that you've seen teams scheme against Derek Carr, even in the sort of John Gruden fueled second stint of Derek Carr?
Well, I think with Carr, I think he earned that reputation as a guy who folds under pressure, especially after he had that horrific leg injury in 2016. He was very skittish in the pocket. When the pocket collapsed, he was throwing off his back foot and doing things like that. So I could see where Joey Bosa is coming from because, you can see those things on film in the past. But, as I mentioned, he's gotten better in those things year to year as when Gruden got here. And this year, I don't think you could say that about Carr anymore. And you could see that even in a Chargers game where, in the second half, a lot of those big explosive pass plays were a result of Carr holding onto the ball, creating with his legs, letting things develop, even though he was heavily pressured in the first half. And Carr kind of snapped back at Bosa a little bit today saying, did Bosa watch the game in reverse? Because, as the game went along, Carr actually was staying in a pocket and trying to create plays more as the play went along, the game went along instead of the opposite. And as far as with Derek Carr, I talked to a Hall of Fame defensive coordinator. I won't name who he is, but he, one of the things he told me is, he wants Carr to check down. So he's going to find ways, to set his defense to just make Carr throw the ball short and check down. And because he was so willing to do it before, just based on certain looks, that was one way you get to him. But I think this year he's just been more aggressive. But right now the Raiders' offensive line is, I think, among one of the worst offensive lines in the league. This is one of the worst offensive lines that he's had, and that's really what stopped this offense, especially in the first half of games when a pass rush is amped up and when they had energy. This offensive line hasn't been able to handle them. And when you see the Raiders' offense start to have success, it's when those defensive lines start tiring out. And that's when they get a little better pass protection, and that's when their offense really starts to kick in gear.
We'll have to have a battle between Bears offensive line and Raiders offensive line just to see who's having more struggles. But I want to ask about Khalil Mack because any time that Khalil Mack and the Raiders come up, we have to at least revisit this a little bit. So it's been just over 3 years since the Raiders traded Mack to the Bears. The Raiders were dead last in sacks in 2018, the year they traded him. They only had 13. So there was this will Mack have more sacks than the Raiders as a team that year that they did that? The next year they were tied for 24th in the league. And then last year they were 29th in the league. Looks like they're having a little bit better start to the season. But if the Raiders had the ability to go back and change history, would they have kept Mack, or do you think that they would do that deal again?
It depends on who you're asking. If you're asking John Gruden, I think he's never going to say he regretted that trade. He's going to say that he had no choice but to make that trade, and he would do it again. But I mean, if you're asking me to, looking at it from an analytical perspective, I think that the trade got the Raiders fair value as far as capital, but the way that they used that capital just wasn't good. So the first round picks that they gotten from the trade, haven't panned out. The cap room that they've gotten from not paying Mac this huge contract, they haven't used wisely. They had a bunch of free agent busts. But this year they've done better. I mean, Max Crosby is one of the guys they hit on. Yannick Ngakoue has been really good. Some of the defensive line guys that they've been able to sign have all worked out. But in the past couple of years, those free agent signings and the draft picks were just they netted zero for the Raiders. So the trade ended up being lopsided because of the way that they used the capital that they got for Mac.
Ding, ding, ding. Perfect answer. Love it. And their defensive line has looked much more energetic this year. Started off in the first game and they gave the Ravens fits. They've kept it going. Crosby obviously is the sort of breakout star on that line. You mentioned Ngakoue. Solomon Thomas is making contributions, which I put a question mark after because he's been extremely quiet in his time in the league. But again, it's starting to gel and come together under Gus Bradley, who started out under Gruden in Tampa, coordinated Seattle's cover 3 Legion of Boom, spent the last 4 years with the Chargers. What do you think the most interesting thing that Bradley's brought to this defensive unit is? Because they are playing with a new energy.
Yeah, I think he's brought an order to this defense, and that's something that they haven't had. They had, with Jack Del Rio, it was eye violations, it was blown coverages, and we're starting to see some of those things with the Washington football team now. And then after Jack Del Rio, it was Paul Gunther, and the defense was too complicated. Guys didn't know what they were doing. He was trying to do too much. And now Gus Bradley comes in, and I was a little hesitant to say that it was a good hire, even though Bradley has had some good defenses, even outside of the Legion of Boom. But I just thought that style of defense, that single high cover 3 system, is just not going to be able to counter some of these offenses that we're seeing in the league, these wide open offenses that we're seeing in the league now. But I think one underrated part about Bradley coming in was he brought his own coaches. So he brought a few of his coaches that have been with him and has taught the system for a long time, like Ron Miles, the secondary coach. And those guys are really cohesive. They know the language. They know what they're looking for. And, there's a synergy between them. And you could see it kind of play out in this defense because these young players have picked it up so quickly. And it just seems like they're playing a lot faster now. And, they're not going to do anything crazy exotic schematically where they're going to try to trick you. But they've been really solid. They've been in the right places. I've hardly seen any blown coverages from them. And it's allowed this pass rush to kind of work because there's no easy opportunities in the secondary for quarterbacks to hit.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that because it kind of seems like you bring in Gus Bradley to give you like a base level of competence. And as I'm not being negative. You're not necessarily saying like, I need a world beater to come in and make this defense, a top 5 unit. You're looking for someone to come in and be like, I'm sick of the tire fire that has been the defense here. Can I just get a level of competence because I believe in my offense so much that we're going to win games on offense? Does that make sense? Was that kind of the plan of like, let's just get a base level of competence in here. Let's not try to reinvent defense. Let's kind of get in here so that we can let our offense shine.
That makes 100% chance. 100% sense because the Raiders under Gruden have been a borderline top 10 offense, and I think they were in the top 10 last year, but their defense was so bad that it really negates any type of progress the offense was making. They were consistently ranked, as a bottom 5 defense. And if you study defenses and how they kind of fluctuate throughout the years, every single team, their defense fluctuates. It's hard to stay in the top 10 of defenses, and it's hard to stay in the bottom 10. But the Raiders, amazingly, were consistently a bottom 5 defense. So they just needed somebody to get them, out of that that bottom 5 range is somewhere, maybe 15 to 20th. If they got in that range, I felt like they could be a playoff team. And I think, Bradley at least brought them enough competence to where I think they could end up being a top, a 15 to 20th defense. And if the offense can pick it up, it could be a playoff formula.
All right. Enough talk about the Raiders. I have to ask you about a Bears player because you do write a lot about the league. You're writing a lot about these rookie quarterbacks. So when you're looking at Justin Fields on film, what are you seeing from like the prospect that he was that we were very excited about? How is that translated to 2+ games of Justin Fields as the primary snap taker for the Bears?
Yeah, I think a lot of the strengths that we saw from Justin Fields in college, as far as his ability to throw the ball downfield, his ball placement, his accuracy, we see those things translate, and his weaknesses as well. There are times when he could anticipate a little better, when he could move on from a read a little bit quicker. And I think in college, some of that stuff was by design, and some of that stuff was taught to him because Ohio State wanted him to play a certain way. And now when he's in a pros, he has to move a little quicker. He has to read things a little bit differently. And, it's going to be a little bit of a transition. And we saw in that Browns game, which I don't put much fault on him at all, but there were times where I thought he could move a little bit quicker. And, even against the Lions, there was times where I thought he could throw the ball with a little more anticipation. But these are things that, you could say of any rookie quarterback. So I think, with Fields, he belongs in offense where he go heavy play action, and you don't need to put 5 guys in a route because he has the arm talent to fit those balls into tight windows. And against the Lions, they added more guys protection, sacrificed some spacing, but you saw Fields make those amazing throws into tight windows. But one thing I want to see more of with Fields is I want to see more option runs. They ran a few zone reads with him, but I mean, that's about the extent of their option runs. You should have a bigger package of option runs when you have an elite quarterback like Justin Fields, because it helps him transition to the league. It gives him another tool to work with, where he doesn't have to just rely on the drop back game, because that could be very tough on rookie quarterbacks. So I don't understand the strategy to put David Montgomery in at quarterback to run option stuff when you have Justin Fields, who probably runs a 4-3, who could run those concepts.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much, now that they've committed to him as the starter, that package grows, knowing that he's going to be, again, very tough to believe whatever comes out of the Chicago coaching staff's mouths. But right now, they've committed to him as being the number one for the rest of the way. And I hope, just like you do, that we'll see more of that, because he's incredibly talented. Not only physically, he's fast, but he's also a really big guy. And he's not a bad runner at all. Like, he has a lot of experience running from the quarterback position. And even at the pro level, we've seen that translate. We saw it in the preseason when he took off. He's a gifted runner and can really hurt defenses very easily when they make small mistakes. So I hope we see that, because it'll put a lot more pressure on opposing defenses. So, got to put you on the spot. Raiders are sitting at 4.5-point favorites in this one. What do you think the Bears need to do to upset the Raiders?
I think they have to run the ball well. The Raiders' run defense is one of their weaknesses. And, I think what we talked about, using Justin Fields more in the run game as an option quarterback, is going to offset the loss of David Montgomery and help out that offensive line. So I think if they are able to run the ball well, and if they run the ball well, I think Justin Fields has to be a part of that. And I also think they have to break tackles in space. I think, Bradley saw what Fields was able to do with those max protection deep shots, and part of his philosophy is to make you check the ball down and rally up and tackle. So some of those Bears skill players, when they get the ball in space, when they get, on a check down, a 3-yard check down or something, they're going to have to break tackles. And it doesn't have to be a 20-yard gain every time, but if you could turn a 3-yard gain into a 6-7-yard gain, that does a lot for the offense. And also, you have to be able to pressure Derek Carr with 4. And obviously, Khalil Mack, they're going to be able to do that. So it's just about keeping that pressure constant and keeping that defensive line rotation strong and just keeping the pressure on throughout the game.
Let me ask you this. The Raiders are in a tough division, and luckily the Bears only have to play the Raiders out of this division. This is the 17th game. This is the one extra game that they added to the schedule. How do you stack these 4 teams right now in the AFC West? Because I think it's just going to be a slugfest.
Yeah, I think it's the best division in football. Everybody says the NFC West is the best division in football, but just watching these guys play, they're just really talented teams. I still think the Chiefs are the number 1 team, even though they had a bit of a shaky start. I think that defense will eventually figure it out. They've been pretty terrible, and Patrick Mahomes was pressing a little bit in the beginning of the season, but that offense is just deadly, and the defense will eventually start to sharpen up. I think Steve Spagnuolo is too good of a defensive coach. 2, I would say the Chargers. They just beat the Raiders, and Justin Herbert, to me, I just think the world of Justin Herbert. I think he's already a top 3, top 4 type of quarterback. Brandon Staley, has already has an effect on that defense, and they're really good at stopping explosive plays. And and it's still the beginning. They're going to get better in that system. So I think the Chargers are a really scary team unless they start, charging and getting a bunch of injury, getting hit with the injury bugs. I think they're going to be a legit playoff contender. And 3, the Raiders, and 4, the Denver Broncos. And the Broncos if you look at their roster, they have a lot of guys on their team, and it's kind of strange to say that they're in the bottom of division. They just don't look like a bottom of division type of team. But they are they have enough players to beat anybody on any given Sunday.
Yeah, it's a rugged division. I think the lead's going to change hands. It's funny you say charging. We were talking about the Chargers on my other podcast a couple days ago, and we said with what Brandon Staley's doing, with what they showed against the Raiders, charging might the meaning of charging as a verb might change, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing with the Charger, when you say charging, it's like they do something stupid at the end of the game to blow everything up, right? But I think what's interesting is Staley is he doesn't put his team in those situations because of his aggression. Going for it in 4th down, going for that touchdown against the Kansas City Chiefs, rather than rely on their kicker, who they weren't really that confident in that moment against that win, and he ended up missing the extra point. And if he missed that field goal, we would say they were charging, but because of Staley, they weren't in that situation.
Yeah, it was interesting to see against the Raiders that he did exactly that. He said, okay, we're going to buckle down and run them over. Like, you could see that very clearly at the end of the game. He was like, no, we're not going to have Justin Herbert air it out 8 or 10 more times. We're going to take Austin Eckler, and we're going to pound, and he's going to seal this thing, and we're going to walk out of here with a W. And we both kind of looked at each other and went, huh, that's different. And if he keeps that up, charging might change as a verb. One of my favorite verbs, by the way. But yeah, I think it'd be good for Chargers fans if it changed meanings.
All right, we got speed round. We're trying this out. Just going with a couple quick hitter questions. And EJ, you can answer this too because you've been to this stadium. But what's the best part of the Raiders moving to Vegas and that new stadium?
Not having to deal with leaky toilets and just a disgusting overall stadium. I mean, that just the upgrade from what you had at the Oakland Coliseum to this $1 billion Allegiant Stadium is just enormous. So you just have to go to Allegiant to kind of understand.
Yeah, it's incredible. The sight lines are amazing. No expense spared in terms of the fan experience. And then my other favorite thing about it is just proximity, right? All those people walking across the bridge on that Monday night game. Like, it feels a part of the place. It's not one of these stadiums that's 35 miles out of the city center and whatever. Like, it is right there at the end of the strip, and everybody just kind of literally walks to the game, pours in. And that was really cool to see. And
you get to party too.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
not
Vegas is a great town. No shortage of things to do. But one of my favorite things that's kind of underrated was the views from inside the stadium looking out. There's always people like, oh, like some of those window vistas looking out over the desert and the mountains as the sun was going down for the Monday night game. I was like, wow, they thought about this thing from every angle, not just looking in and what it looked like when you're in the seats looking down, but as you're walking around, it's just a gorgeous building.
Nice. All right. Well, I'll have to go. All right. So if you do happen to stumble into a casino, maybe your room is there and you just go on on the floor. Is there a table game that you like, or slots, or poker? Like, what's your game in Vegas?
So actually, I love poker. I love Texas Hold'em. Um, I really don't know how to play much else. My dad was actually a professional blackjack player, so gambling's in my blood a little bit.
Okay.
But I'm not a huge gambler. But I think I'm pretty good in poker. I mean, I generally win. Come out with money um, more often than not. So yeah, poker's my favorite game.
All right. Well, we see you in the card room. We will turn tail and go the other way, not give us give you our money. What do you think in terms of just the fan base in general? What do you think is the best thing about Raiders fans?
So I think the best thing about Raider fans is there's just a real strong family environment when you go to a Raider game and you're wearing silver and black. If you're wearing a different colored jersey, it might be a different story for you. But if they know that you're a Raider fan, they invite you to their tailgates. They just treat you like a good friend that they've known forever, and it's just a very strong community within Raider fans.
All right. Now, I follow you on Twitter, which I recommend everybody doing because you have great stuff. One of the best things that you do is you take pictures of pizza that you are making and you are bragging about and always making me hungry. And so I have to ask, what's the secret to great homemade pizza?
The secret I think is to make everything yourself. I think a lot of the store bought stuff has its limitations, and especially dough. I think learning how to make dough could be difficult, but it's really worth it. And I think once you get into it, you really kind of try to perfect it, and you try to mess with ratios and try different doughs, different hydration percentage, and it's just really fun to do. And I've come up with my own formula that I've been pretty happy with, and it just takes it takes it's a process, and every little detail changes the eventual outcome, and it's just a fun process to get into. And even if you mess up, pizza's still good. So
Right.
it's and I think pizza is a type of food where you share too. It's meant to be shared. So it's always good to be able to share with friends, family, and whatnot too. So yeah, I highly recommend just trying to make your own dough and see where it takes you.
All right. And since we're from Chicago, we would be remiss if we didn't ask, since you make your own pizza, would you ever try making deep dish?
Um, so I've never been to Chicago. I've never been to Chicago, so I've actually never had a good deep dish pizza.
Well,
And
we'll have to fix
I'm not
that.
one of those guys that are hating against it. I just haven't had a good one, and I think it's probably hard to find a good one outside of Chicago.
It's probably true. It's a very different experience, right? I don't
Mhm.
think a lot of Chicagoans eat deep dish pizza all the time. I think it's still something that they do occasionally. And there's a lot of good pizza that's not deep dish in Chicago. So I just want to, for the record, we
For the record.
know that Chicago is not just deep dish, but it is part of that culinary experience of Chicago. But yeah, it's a very different experience, and you shouldn't want to do anything after you eat it, right? Like that's you're gonna need like a couch to lay down on. But I love your stuff, Ted, and I really appreciate you coming on, and EJ for setting this up because your stuff's great. Make sure everybody listening goes checks it out on the Athletics website or the app. You can get it an app on your phone to make sure that you get the Athletic articles. And Ted pops up on Robert Mays's podcast every now and again, and you have your own podcast, correct?
Yeah, we have a Raiders podcast, State of the Nation, with Jimmy Durkin, Vic Tafer, and Tashawn Reed. So yeah, if you want to hear about the Raiders and you want to hear our preview, we did a preview, and we're gonna do a post game after game as well.
Well, love your stuff. Never too many chances to talk to you. I'll take everyone I can get because I learn something every time. So thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your Raiders knowledge with Bears Over Beers listeners. And we'll definitely talk to you again soon.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
All right, EJ, we'll take a quick break, and then after this, we're going to get into our own Bears preview. All right, EJ. So here's the Bears preview. I have 4 bullet points. The first 3 say Justin Fields, Justin Fields, Justin Fields. We got to talk about this. We have to talk about this, and I'm going to bring this experience of being there at Soldier Field into this conversation. Everything about that game was kind of amazing about the entire fan base just completely 100% behind number one. He came on the field, cheers. Okay, I get it, right?
Sure.
He came off the field for this is warm-ups, right? Standing ovation. Like great calf stretching. Like, I mean, the amount of like cheering for this was remarkable. Okay. But never heard a bad word about it. Never heard a doubt. Never heard he's got to work on this, and this. No, it was all positive vibes. There was a lot of negative Nagy talk. We have talked about that a lot in terms of like, don't listen to what Nagy says. Watch what Nagy does. And I think that proved out today. Nagy came out in his press conference and announced that Justin Fields would be the starter moving forward. I think that's a real thing. I thought it was a real thing at the game. Like when he showed how good he could be, toothpaste is out of the tube, man. Like you can't put that back in. And so I just want to have a marker here to just say, this is what we've been waiting for. This is the moment that Justin Fields has taken over this team. And from now on, this is Justin Fields' team. We will be talking about Justin Fields and the development of a young quarterback. There's still things that we're going to see in the progression of this young man as he becomes a better quarterback. We don't get to skip ahead to advanced Mahomes level stuff. Like he still has to get there. But the things that we saw in his first home start were incredibly encouraging, particularly the downfield throws that were delivered into bread baskets to Darnell Mooney and Allen Robinson.
Yeah, I just want to say that, what happened was 2 things, and they're both really important. And I had posted something on Twitter after the game that was kind of a 4-point plan. And first one happened today, which is start Justin the rest of the way. No back and forth. No when Andy's healthy. No caveats. Like Justin's healthy. Justin's a starter, period. Like that was step 1. That got accomplished today. Step 2, Nagy doesn't call plays again. He just doesn't. He can't. Yep. And that's what happened really on Sunday because look, Justin Fields legitimately almost started the Sunday before. He played the majority of that game. And Nagy was calling plays and it looked terrible. It was one of the worst games the Bears have ever played. And it's the combination of Justin Fields being in there, taking the starter reps, and laser calling the plays. And I had to chuckle to myself throughout the game. I watched the game with one of our colleagues, Patty, who does the quickest game wrap up in the business. And
she's funniest.
Yeah, absolutely. And she said, do you think it's Nagy or do you think it's laser? I was like, how can you ask if this is Nagy if you've watched the games? And I realized that I watch Bears games, more of them and more intently than most people do, and with a different level of detail, a different filter, a different lens. I totally accept that. There is no way. And the national press came around to this too. They're like, well, maybe it's Nagy, maybe it's laser. We don't know. And I'm like, you don't have to ask anybody, right? Everything came out after the game. I just chuckled at that because there was no way to watch the product on the football field, which was a cohesive, balanced offense that played to strengths, challenged all areas of the field, and think that that's a Matt Nagy offense. That's not a Matt Nagy offense. It's Matt Nagy's plays called by someone else who understands the rhythm of play calling. So it was just that thumbprint, fingerprint, whatever you want to call it, was so laser start to finish. And the way he meshed those plays and that sequence with Fields' skills was the reason that Sunday was Sunday. And if we continue to see that partnership between laser calling plays And Justin Fields, again, continuing to develop. Parts 3 and 4 of that plan were, look, he's a rookie, roll with the punches. You're going to have ups and downs. There's things he does well. There's things he's going to have to grow into. You don't get nervous about that. You chalk it up to development and keep going and try and get better. And I have full confidence in Justin Fields doing that. He has an excellent memory. He learns from his mistakes. And then just, keep that role going. And part 4 was close, near and dear to your heart, which was scout lots of offensive line, right? Because you're going to need to fill up on that. But that's a next year thing. But for this year, it's get him in there and keep him in there. Laser calls the plays, period, end of story. And 3, ride the wave, because you're going to get those great plays that we saw on Sunday. That first shot to Mooney was the signal. Like, that was the first one that make DCs around the league go, oh, okay, we can't run late with a guy 50 yards down the seam, because he'll hit him. Like, in stride, in the chest, with momentum, pulling him away from the safety. That was I tweeted out about that throw. That was a beautiful throw. And the Wonder Robinson later in the game is the one that's really going to give all those DCs nightmares. The first one was kind of like wake up call. Okay, maybe. The Wonder Robinson was the, oh crap. Like, we don't get to make mistakes against the Bears anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the couple, Robinson had 2, Mooney had 2, right? And the Robinson with the hole shot, I really liked that one. That one I tweeted out because I could see myself in the background, and so that
I
was
saw
kind of
that
fun.
Wow.
But the energy, right, of the crowd is just something that can't be replicated at home. But another thing is, and I didn't watch the TV full broadcast. I watched the condensed game when I came back to try to prep for the post game show. But we noticed from where we were at, when we were looking at Nagy, Nagy's usually like got the paper, the call play sheet up to his eyes, and every time they train their cameras on Nagy on the sidelines, he's always just like got his nose on the call sheet, and he's just focused on that. He's like, looking like a bookworm into that call sheet, and he just really wasn't doing that. Like, we were kind of watching him, and he just seemed a little bit more in tune to everything around him, and not just like an offensive coordinator that was up in the booth. And like, we could see that, and I'm surprised that they didn't maybe show more of that on the broadcast, because I think we could just tell from how he was acting that he wasn't actually calling plays.
I wonder if that's addition by subtraction too. Just you saying that. I mean, I knew that was the case, and I knew that was going on, because I actually DM'd you versus the game during the game and said, what odds would you give me that Nagy's not calling plays today? And your answer was off the board. He's definitely not calling
I'm not giving you odds.
which just made me laugh so much, because it was such a you answer. But just in you talking about that right there, I'm wondering if that doesn't make him even a better overall head coach, because we both like him as a head coach, as a leader of players, as someone that makes pretty good in-game decisions when we're not talking about play calling. In terms of timing, he hasn't had, huge issues that a lot of other coaches have. I wonder if that sort of heads up, sort of greater overview doesn't even sort of amplify that a little bit.
He's not as aggressive as I think that he needs to be in certain situations, right? Like when he had the ball down in the inside the 5, down on the road early against Cleveland, and he decided to kick a field goal. Like, there are things that he could improve on in terms of like that game management aspect of what he does. In terms of the leadership stuff, it's more of like a reflection of how the players respond. I mean, we can't necessarily tell what that looks like, but it looks from the outside like the player's very cohesive. They play for him. And there were times in the last couple of years that team could have fallen apart. He could have lost the locker room, but they still fought, and they were competitive in most of those games. And so, that's where we're coming from and saying, like, we think he's a good head coach, like in terms of like that aspect of things. But he hasn't played the media particularly well, which that's part of a coach's job. You can say it's not important, but is part of the coach's job. And I mean, I think it's important, but he's done that poorly. I think he could have certainly even played that role better when he could have praised Bill Lazor more directly and said, look, we talked about it. I stepped back. I gave it over to Lazor, and he did an incredible job. We all have roles on this team, and that was his role for this game. End of story. But he brought it back to him. He was the ultimate decision maker. It was, and it felt clunky, and it didn't come off real well. And he got kind of blasted for it, as he should have. And so I think there are aspects that he could improve on. But I do think that there's enough history with him in saying, like, yeah, like the players respond to him. They seem to like him. Maybe now, if he is done for good in the calling the plays thing, maybe we can, maybe we have something here.
Yeah, and maybe he even gets better at those things because again, in
Right.
Cleveland on the road, he was concentrating on what play he was going to call as opposed to whether or not he should be calling a play or kicking the field goal. He's got to do both. And now he only has to do one. Maybe that focus makes him even better, right? He goes, no, we should go for it. Bill, dial something up, right? That might be a release that unlocks him to be an even better head coach, which wasn't something I was really thinking about because I was just honestly so focused on getting the play sheet out of his hand.
I think in his mind, he wants to be Andy Reid for sure, right? Like that would be his mentor, or some of these other offensive. He wants to be McVay. He wants to be thought of in those circles. But really, probably what he needs to be doing is thought of more as a guy like John Harbaugh would probably be like the guy. Tomlin, guys that like can add in during the week, but on game day, they're the head coach, and that's what they're focused on. They're not focused on play calling duties. And so I know that just think about that from a professional aspect. You have an idea of what you want to be, what you think you are, and the reality is coming up that like maybe that's not who I am. And so there is probably a little bit of, not playing amateur psychologist too much here, but there's probably something in his mind that is struggling with that. But if he has, had that awakening and has said, okay, this is what I need to do moving forward, maybe he can keep his job, because now you've got 13 more games with Justin Fields to show what you can do with him to develop him into the player that he needs to become for Chicago to win championships.
Yeah, regardless of the record, and we've said this in a lot of different ways, that this year is not about the record, it's about the development. But if Nagy can keep his hands off the play sheet and Bill Lazor can be consistent and Justin Fields can continue to learn, there is every possibility in the world that Justin Fields is the offensive rookie of the year.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
If Justin Fields is the offensive rookie of the year, Matt Nagy's not going anywhere. Right. But he's got to keep it. And all he needs, and this is my next $1 million, JB, is a modification sticker for all his little BU stickers. And it's a little carrot and it says a different above it. And he can just go stick those on all his little BU stickers. And it just says, be a different you, because the other you, he's actually really good at. We've just talked about all his strengths as a sort of, people say CEO head coach. I don't like that term, but that's what it is. And he's really good at that. And that's not an easy thing to be either. He's just a terrible play caller and he needs to stay away from it. If he does, all the arrows are pointing up. Justin Fields look good. I think he'll look better with more experience. Lazor's game plan was good. Yes, it's Detroit. Yes, the Bears always get healthy against Detroit and it's a lousy defense. I know. I don't care. It was a good and balanced game plan. Is it going to be rougher against the Raiders? Sure. No problem. And we can get into talking about the Raiders a little bit. And I actually want to flip to the other side when we talk about the Raiders, because I really think we need to talk about it's all Nagy and Lazor and Fields, and it should be. I get it. That's Chicago. But Sean Desai and the job he's doing with the defense, especially with the rush.
Yeah.
Sean Desai's work with the defensive line pass rush is hiding what is a terrible secondary outside of Jalen Johnson.
Right.
And they're not getting crushed. And that is a miracle. And Sean Desai deserves the biggest credit we can possibly give him for that.
Yeah, we're talking about right now through 4 games, and the Bears are 2-2. They're not 4-0, and they haven't just allowed their defensive line to tee off in every game. So through 4 games, they are first in the league in sacks with 15. And Quinn looks good. Mac looks good. All these guys look good, but they're also being put in positions to succeed. They're also being put in incredibly advantageous positions based on what Desai is doing with them. And so 15 sacks through 4 games is a really nice pace. I mean, that is that's not that you're going to, just put a multiplier in, but that would be significantly more than what Fangio was able to do with the defense in 2018, where they had 50 sacks. And so they're on a really nice pace right now. Again, who knows if they'll be able to keep that pace up, but you have to be pretty excited about what Sean Desai has been able to do. And as we just saw, and as we talked about Joey Bosa going after Derek Carr on Twitter, is that, hey man, like if you heat this guy up, he's gonna. And Ted was very nice and diplomatic, but there was a
He was.
play. There was a play late in that Chargers game
Third
where
down.
Carr stepped up in the pocket and then just like held the ball close to him, waited for the impact, and the nearest defender was 2 steps away. Like
Yeah.
he could have gotten rid of it. He could have tried to make a move. No, he like just kind of wrapped up and gave up on the play. And so, yeah, I do think that he got heated up and it bothered him. And he got to the point where he reverted to some of those bad habits that he formed basically around that injury. And so I do think that they, of course, are the key to this game because they can have an impact just like that defensive front of the Chargers did on Monday night.
Yeah, I know the play you're talking about. We talked about it on Bootleg specifically. It's a third down play, and this is sort of my second defensive key of the game for the Bears is Hunter Renfrow on third down is such a security blanket. He's a very good football player. He's underrated. He had a great play on special teams, but that's not who he is. He is the go-to guy. He is there. Think of him as a Julian Edelman on that team because he is. That's his role. And it was an ISO route to Renfrow, and Bradley just mugged him. Bradley just double mugged him and said, somebody else is going to beat us. They put a guy inside and a guy outside in a straight bracket and said, you're not getting Renfrow. Go somewhere else. Literally, Carr looked up. He was like, Renfrow, oh no, what do I do? And he pulled the ball in, didn't get hit for another half second, but he didn't even look at other options. He had Waller and, tighter throw, but at least make the throw. So, Ted talked about the offensive line of the Raiders not being great. The defensive line, we just talked about the Bears, is as hot as any unit in the league right now. They're getting, Quinn is just a whole different thing healthy. Like, obviously, the injury was holding him back. His burst is unreal again. Trevis Gibson needs some love. He had his breakout game. I tweeted out in the middle of that game, when people go back to the All-22, this is going to be the Trevis Gibson breakout game. Book it. And
it was my trench tribute of the week on the review show.
Beautiful. And when you have multiple pieces going together, it's that rule of 3. In this case, it's more like rule of 4, right? You've got Hicks, you've got Bilal Nichols, who has been quiet. Quinn has been loud. Mack is still there. Trevis Gibson is heating up. Like, all of a sudden, this thing is just hitting on all cylinders, and it's going to go up against a line that is not a particular stalwart right now. They've had their issues. So that sets up really well for the Bears, but they have to contain Renfrow on third down or they're going to have continuation of drives. Other than that, we'll see how it goes. But if they can do those two things and really move the Raiders to adjustment to get away from that, to have to do things to deal with that, you always got to worry about this team in the second half because they do heat up, and Gruden is good at adjustments. They've been typically slow starting. And if the Bears can get up early, keep that pressure on, and then be able to sort of unleash the pass rush even more, it might nullify those second half adjustments.
Yeah, I mean, the Chargers, you've got Brandon Staley, who came from the Vic Fangio tree. You've got Sean Desai, who came from the Vic Fangio tree. So, you have Cousins, in terms of what the Chargers are and what the Bears are on defense. Obviously, both guys are in their first year in those particular positions. And so it's interesting to watch Chargers defense. It's interesting to watch Broncos defense and Bears defense and try to pick up some of these differences. But I think that Sean Desai should be able to watch that game film and say, well, I speak that language. I know what they did. And that's for the best, right? If it was a completely different defensive system, and that's what was giving Carr so much trouble, you might be like, okay, I mean, maybe they can incorporate some of it. This is, they're related. And so, you feel really good about Desai being able to pick up some of the stuff that the Chargers put on tape there because, the Raiders looked terrible in the first half. I mean, I thought they almost got run out of town.
Yep.
I mean, it was 21-0 at half. And so, and the Chargers probably could have run them out of town a little bit in the third quarter, but they stalled out a little bit and let them back into it, and then they finally put them away. But I think this game's interesting. They got to win. I want to say they got to win it because again, we don't want to keep saying that, but this schedule's getting tough. They're gonna see some really good teams here in the near future before the bye week, and hopefully after the bye week we can get David Montgomery back. But this is one of the more winnable games that they're going to have. One of the more winnable games on the road that they're going to have for the rest of the year. And so I do think that this will be a really big test for Justin Fields. It'll be a really big test for this new construction of play caller and Fields, and it'll be a nice test for Sean Desai. And I think 4.5's fine, but this is one that I would actually feel comfortable taking the Bears with those points, because I think they're going to keep it close.
I sure hope so. The other thing they're going to have to do is cap off the top, because just like we talked about the Bears having explosive plays in the first half, if the Raiders do heat up and come out and hit a couple of deep shots to Ruggs and put points on the Bears, it's going to change the complexion of the game that way as well. So Desai is going to have to sort of guard against those deeper explosive plays early in the game. Then he's going to be able to tighten up later, because the Bears have also been really decent against the run. They've had their moments, but if you can force the Raiders to go to that more West Coast crossing route offense that Gruden really wants to in those 4 and 5 yard gains, that doesn't scare Sean Desai. That doesn't scare the Bears defense. What scares him is 35 to 50 yards at a chuck to Ruggs or Waller. Like, that's what scares him. So if they can limit those in the first half, they're going to set themselves up for a competitive game. And I think you're right. I think they do keep it close. It's going to be a really interesting game either way.
Yeah, a lot of talent on that offense, so we'll see what happens. But let's circle back to your Ravens Claw beer.
This is Black Raven Flocktoberfest. It is a lager, but it's a fall seasonal, and I kind of like that, because a lot of times fall seasonals are, stouts and porters. We get into the heavier beers. This is a lager. This is a lighter beer. Again, an Oktoberfest style. It's delightful. It's clean. 5% alcohol by volume, so you can certainly drink a couple of them. They say balanced, crisp, clean, and toasty. There is a little bit of that at the end. It doesn't have, it's not particularly bitey, like a Czech Pilsner or a true German lighter lager. It has a little bit rounder, warmer flavor than that, and I love it. I am super glad that I've got 5 more of these in my fridge, and it's got some great. I know you love can art, so
I love can art.
It's got this great beer stein can art on the back of it. So, no, all around, love it. How was your hard to find listener provided booze?
So here's the thing. I have yet to see this in a store near me. And so when I saw this posted, I reached out to Chad, and he was willing to go get me one, and then he gifted it to me, which is incredibly kind. And I just have to say, it's better than I even thought I was going to be. I thought it'd be good, but this is delicious. I mean, this is just...
It's hard sometimes with expectations when you've been, like you said,
it met them. Years. It's in that Pappy tree, right? I mean, this isn't Pappy, but this is in the Pappy tree. It's in the, the same people. And sure. I can tell. Like, you can tell. I mean, I've had Pappy. I don't have it now, but I have.
It's not like I'm just like pouring it in my rum and my whiskey and cokes.
I mean, again, drink how you want to drink, but that would be something I
that would be the do. JB made it, right? He's pouring Pappy and Coke.
I think you'd have to check me into a facility. I've lost it by then, but this is delicious. This is something that you don't need anything with. It's fantastic on its own. It's great, smooth. It's got really good complex flavor. I don't know, man. Like, this is living.
Yeah. No. Well,
Justin Fields. Wearing my new hat with the 46 Bears logo I got at the game.
Yeah.
I'm living, man. This is great.
We should give the shout out to the new togs. It's a sharp hat. But shout out to Chad as well. He's been a longtime supporter of Bears Over Beers, longtime listener, interacts on Twitter all the time. And there's been a lot of folks like that. And many of them have reached out and said, hey, how do we support Bears Over Beers? And we really didn't have a way besides, buy us a beer if you see us, or we've had listeners reach out to us and take us out or buy us a beer. We've had listeners send us a beer before, one of their favorites, little stuff like that, but not a way that if you just really enjoy the content every week that you could help support the show. And now we do. Bears Over Beers is now on Patreon. We got the Patreon site up last week. All you have to do is search Bears Over Beers on the Patreon site. It'll pop up. We have 3 different tiers of support. benefits for all 3 tiers. And if that's what you choose to do, thank you very much for even considering it. It's incredibly humbling that people want to pay us to do this work, but it does help us produce more content. We've been really lucky this year to have some tremendous guests that's lined up just very well for us. And we're going to continue to try and do that. It's been enjoyable for me. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But if you want to, check out the Patreon site. If you can do it, great. If you can't, that's fine too. The other thing is we're on YouTube now. So go watch these, right? Watch these great guests that we have, and like it on YouTube, because likes on YouTube helps the algorithm. Leave a comment with a few words about what you thought about the episode. We love listener and viewer comments. They help us make the show better. We've gotten some great suggestions from viewers and listeners over the years to make the show better. So just interact with it that way. It's a new way that we're presenting content. It's just an extra thing that we're doing. Big shout out to the editing help we're getting from our buddy Robert Schmitz, who is also part of Windy City Gridiron. Couldn't do it without him. But love creating the content, love the interaction. Let us know how it lands with you, and we'll just keep making more of it.
Awesome, man. I appreciate everybody listening. We'll be back next week with another guest. And until then, Justin Fields is a starter. Bear down.